I'm not someone who has a startup background. I knew that I wanted to do something that when I went to bed on a Sunday night, I woke up the next day and was excited by what the week had ahead of me. Sort of stumbled across Creative HQ. I was investing in one of their startups. Pretty quickly thought, wow, what an amazing environment to be in.
One thing that's been evident to chatting you today is like you are amplifying other people's opportunities and stories.
We say we do cool shit with cool people. We've had about 1,000 founders through our doors, like 400 and odd companies growing, by the program. 60% of those are still active today.
That's a phenomenal number.
It's a phenomenal number.
Tech is oil, right?
Oh, look, amen to that. I think if you look at the Irish government, they're sitting on something like a $16 billion surplus because they invested in a startup portfolio. We want a coalition of the willing to come along and just help us take advantage of this opportunity.
What does the next 20 years look like for Creative HQ, and what are you doing about it today?
In 10 years' time.
Hey everyone, Troy Hammond here. So that means you're with us on the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. On today's episode, we're chatting with Catherine Jones, and Catherine is the CEO of Creative HQ here in Wellington, doing things on a national scale. And so today's episode, we're going to pull back the veneer of what's been happening at Creative HQ over the last 20 years, because they've recently just released a report that talks about some of their successes and talks about some of the things that they've been doing in Wellington and New Zealand for the last 20 years. And we're going to talk about what's to come, what needs to change, what needs to grow, what needs to get better, what needs to stay the same. And so it's a really fascinating conversation. I love chatting with Catherine. I think you'll enjoy watching or listening to it. And so strap in and enjoy.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning in to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
How's your weekend anyway? Good?
Yeah. It was good actually. I'm a bit stiff today. I played my first hockey game in 25 years over the weekend with a couple of friends of mine. And that took me out of my comfort zone, which is something I like to do on a regular basis. As I age, I had a significant birthday in November last year.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks for that. And promptly fractured my ribs mountain biking about 4 weeks later and thought, actually I just need to set up a healthier lifestyle for myself as I age. That it's not about how you look anymore or how much you weigh or how the clothes sit. It's actually how you feel and how you want to feel in 20 years' time, right? More than ever before, I'm just quite conscious of this concept of treating your body now for how you want it to treat you or what you want it to be able to do in 20 years' time. So taking up hockey again for the season after a 25-year hiatus was part of that mentality. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Absolutely terrified.
Were you good at hockey previously?
Oh, I was okay at hockey. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I took to the field and thought, gosh, I don't know if the game has just got faster or if I've just got slower, but suddenly that ball seemed to travel really quickly. Yeah. And that stick seemed very close to my face.
Yeah.
But look, good to take yourself out of your comfort zone and throw in. I think it's really healthy, particularly as a CEO, to remind yourself on a regular basis what it's like to be new to something and what it's like to feel like the least capable person in the room at something.
Yeah.
And just be able to have that empathy. Yeah. Particularly in the sector we're in, you've got founders coming to us because we take really early stage founders at Creative HQ. Often they've just got an idea and they don't know where to go with it.
Well, good on you. I think I'm 44 this year, turning 45, and I definitely, I've told this story way too many times on the podcast, I won't, but I get hit by a truck and then my health just deteriorated really quickly because of it, and then I spiraled really poorly downwards, and it took me to realise, holy shit, I need to do something about this because 20 years could go by very quickly in my life now, and I'll find myself very unfit and unhealthy. And so, I think the confidence to push yourself out of your comfort zone and to do things that challenge you or just to do something different is really inspiring.
And just to do it, right? Because I think we all say, there's a coulda, woulda, shoulda, I'll do it tomorrow, I'm going to start that next week. Yeah. It's so easy to put your own barriers in place as to why you're not going to actually do it now.
And it's around people too. And I say that because I've just listened to a podcast this morning that was on loneliness of a CEO, right? And it's something that I think that we have, the epidemic for loneliness that we have at the moment is extreme. It's if you look at the studies that have been done in the States recently, it is really, really sad. And I think we've stopped doing things where we get together in groups of people a lot. And so I think sports is such a good opportunity to get back together and get some dopamine.
Yeah, it is. And I think also be honest about, the want to get together. We do see that a lot at Creative HQ. I mean, when COVID hit, we had to pivot our own services into online and hybrid delivery. I mean, and before that, we were the organisation that it was almost like, how many people can you pack into a room with Post-it notes and lots of saliva, right?
Yeah.
And getting everything up on the walls. And so we had to pivot very quickly our own services into how can we service these founders the way they deserve to be serviced, and give them the same experience initially fully online. And for us, that was a moment we had to act like a startup ourselves. We put a design sprint in place internally with our team to work out what tools you're going to use, how we build the capability in our staff, how do we do problem validation of that ourselves, and then became very good at that. But I think then there was almost this dialogue, and now this is what people want. And then once actually people had recovered from COVID, were through it, we saw actually pretty quickly the desire for people to say, actually, we want to come to you in person. We want more flexibility than we've had before. We want the ability to do part of the program from our homes, but actually those moments where we come together as founders in a cohort and we have the ability to connect and share, because we're traveling this journey together, are really important to us. So as we've been iterating on our program since COVID, it's very much about getting those points of cohort meetup right. We always do an in-person boot camp still right at the start of our accelerator programs, for example. And a big part of that is saying, hey guys, it's like first day of school, right?
Yeah.
You're all going through this journey together, and you've got different businesses and you're at slightly different stages and you bring different experiences to it. But actually you're all going to go through this together, and you're going to have highs and lows through the program at different times. And it's great to see the work that Callaghan Innovation has done on mental health and wellbeing of founders, over the last year and 2 years.
Yeah.
And we've adopted their charter around that. The new Startup Aotearoa website that we've built in partnership with our friends at Ministry of Awesome and Callaghan, that's got some really great resources on it around mental health and wellbeing for founders and CEOs.
Yeah, no, it's interesting conversation. Like I talk to a lot of founders, as do you, right? And a lot of them are very, very lonely. And so it's like hard to... it's great to see them getting back together. And I think personally, like I 100% believe that the more you can get in person together, the better opportunities that you'll create from an early stage.
Well, they say in 10 years' time, the number one thing we're going to be teaching people is humanity, right? Actually, how to be humans, because we're relying so much on technology, and with AI starting to come through to do everything for us and to be our brains, and in some respects to be our hearts, right? To anticipate what people are going to be thinking and feeling, and then market and design to those. But actually, what are we going to lose in terms of knowing how to be good humans and having the ability to interact with each other during that time?
Yeah, interesting. Hey, so speaking of highs and lows, you had a big high recently, High Tech Awards nomination. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a cool moment. I've been a big advocate of what you all do for a long time, and so I've been in many times to support and watch and the likes. But I think for those people that don't know, for the people that are listening, like what does Creative HQ do?
So Creative HQ for 20 years now has been helping early stage startup founders to build scalable, investable businesses. And the first 10 years of that were about incubating companies. And startup was our sole purpose for being. We were set up by Wellington's Economic Development Agency to be a startup hub for Wellington, where those founders with those very scalable, investable ideas could come and grow and work together side by side. And then in around 2003, we started branching those programs out from incubation programs to accelerator programs, so much more structured, short, intense programs for startups. But we also started branching out and offering innovation services to government departments and to large corporates, saying actually, with the strapline, entrepreneurs are everywhere. So actually, let's try and get this innovation mindset, and let's try and spread that across all corners of New Zealand and all corners of all sectors of business, so that we can have more people working in these ways, lean, agile design thinking with a very customer-centric approach, thinking about how we validate the problems we're working on, why actually are we doing these projects, how do we set up ourselves so that we can be future-proof, so we're aiming to disrupt ourselves as new technologies are coming in. And so our, the breadth of work that we do at Creative HQ has been much more than a startup hub. And through that, we've created this really powerful ecosystem. I think over the last 25 years, we've had something like 35,000 people come through our programs. And like you, anybody who touches us then becomes very curious very quickly about Creative HQ and the work that we do. It's addictive actually working with the people that you have come through our doors, and people want to be a part of that. So we've got this massive ecosystem now, and an engaged ecosystem across New Zealand of people who are innovators, are entrepreneurs, or are innovation curious and say, actually, I just want to be giving back. I want to be a part of this somehow, which is actually just a really cool workplace to walk into every day.
I like that, innovation curious, because there's a lot of people who are, like, I'd call more intrapreneurs than entrepreneurs, but do a fantastic job. But like, it's like startup, like Creative HQ for me sometimes is like a bit of a gateway drug for some people to, horrible reference, but probably pertinent, that, exposes them to the industry, and then they go, holy crap, this is something that I want to devote my life to now. What do you think is it about the startup world or the entrepreneurial world that people feel so addicted to?
I don't want to sound corny here, but this is truly how I believe. I think it's an industry that inspires people. So there's a massive element of inspiration there and hope. We're in a pretty rough time in New Zealand at the moment. We've got this economic recession. People are losing their jobs. I think it's very acutely felt in Wellington right now with the government agency redundancies, for example. And then you've got these companies, these entrepreneurs who are saying, now is my time. Here's an opportunity for me actually to do the thing I've always wanted to do. I've had this idea, I've had this dream. We hear that a lot, those words. I've had this idea, I've had this dream. And I'm just going to have a go at doing it. Now, we help them pretty quickly work out whether that's a viable idea, whether they're solving a problem that needs solving, whether it's scalable, investable, or whether it's a small business idea. Both are great, but if it's a small business idea, that's not who Creative HQ helps. Creative HQ helps the scalable, investable. And then as you see those ideas come to life and you realise just how many entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs we have in New Zealand doing these cool things, you want to hear more about it. I mean, I went up to the New Zealand International Business Awards last year. I was nominated for a finalist in one of those categories, which got me in the room of about 1,200 people. And there were companies up on there that I hadn't heard of. Embarrassed I hadn't heard of them, right? But I consider myself a pretty typical Kiwi. And, the company, Conqueror, have you heard about Conqueror? No. Do you know Conqueror?
No.
No. And nobody... And
I think I'm like, I know every startup, right?
And nobody at my table or the tables
Conqueror
around me had...
As in I Conquer the World Conqueror?
Well, I guess that's where the name comes from. But it's it's basically a fitness business. They run virtual challenges. So it's a New Zealand company. And they went from $2 million of revenue to $77 million of revenue in 12 months.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And they basically...
I have not heard about this company.
How have you not heard of them?
Yeah.
How had I not heard of them walking in there? So obviously they're in scale-up mode, and they run these challenges. These are Kiwis, and they run these virtual challenges of trailways and runs and routes all over the world that people sign up to run the route. And then they make these very ornate medals that are almost handcrafted. And when you complete your challenge, so if you do the walk the length of Aotearoa, then you get sent your medal to say, congratulations, you achieved that challenge. And then they've got this very large growing cult of people who, do challenge after challenge after challenge as a way of getting them outdoors and keeping them fit.
I'm literally going to sign up tomorrow.
And then you collect the medals. Now you can see how a company like that might, go along to an investor initially to pitch and say, look, we've got this idea and we're going to handcraft these medals and people are going to sign up because they want to earn the medals. And some investors going...
I don't get it.
Yeah. 2 million to 77 million in 12 months. I'm just going to say that one more time. And that's just one company, right? So
and where are they based?
I think they're based in Auckland, but don't quote me on that one.
Yeah, that's cool. I've seen a few like fitness startups, like actually Creative HQ's pushed. Like, there's a few recently that I've seen come out of Creative HQ.
Yeah, so we had Scotty who came through with Fit Rewards
Yep.
and one of our recent impact accelerators, for example. And what's great about companies like Conqueror being in existence and then Scotty Diamond coming through our doors with Fit Rewards is they're a great source of inspiration and hope for him, right?
If you see it and you can feel it, you can do it, right?
And they're nearby. And I think, we hear this time and time again from our entrepreneurs. It's great to hear stories of Elon Musk and entrepreneurs like that, Richard Branson, who clearly are global, geniuses. But actually they seem so out of reach to your average Kiwi founder who's starting out. They want to hear success stories around them. They want to hear the local success stories of people who have, just like them, who have done it. They can see themselves in them. And the good thing about the New Zealand ecosystem is maturing as you see people wanting to give back. It's such a collaborative ecosystem. So you've got those early stage founders now or early stage investors or first employees in those companies that have made it, who then go off and set up their own startups second, third, fourth time, or invest in the startups or come back as mentors and coaches in our programs. So, all of that, I think, to answer your original question, just adds up to it's this sector of hope and inspiration, but with a model and a pathway to get there. It's attainable.
I think the exciting feeling about like you are not held back by your boss or by department or by this, and you can just go after something is just so alluring to me personally and other people,
And a growing number of youth too, I think, because, we run some specific youth programs at Creative HQ. They started under our Venture Up brand, and now we have what we call the Youth Incubator. And it's, just really smart people coming out of university, very fluent on AI and emerging technologies, and building businesses around them that people of an older generation don't understand.
Yeah.
And saying, why actually now would I go and work for a large organisation and be the photocopy guy or, have to do my year of due diligence when actually I've got the smarts and I've got the idea and I just want to have a go at doing it. Now, there's nothing wrong with being the photocopy guy in the first year of doing due diligence. That was my background and I'm a big advocate for it. You can create a great career that way.
Is there still photocopiers?
But, also this is a viable career option for people too. And, rather than your mum and dad saying now, actually, that's a nice idea, but focus on getting a proper job. I think this is now seen as a really viable career path for students. We want more of that.
And I think you are in the best time of your life to found a startup when you're young, when you don't have the financial responsibilities as like people of my age do, when you don't have kids, like when you don't have a mortgage, when you have that belief that I can do this no matter what. Like you haven't seen rejection probably as much. And so I think it's fantastic for the youth to go into startups because they're the ones that are just, their self-belief is amazing.
Oh, amen to all of that. I think we've been doing quite a lot of study at Creative HQ around entrepreneurial campuses around the world. And there's a real opportunity for one of the universities in New Zealand at the moment too, I think, to claim that, to put into their strategy. And we've written a bit of a roadmap for that as to how they could do that.
Do you think that'll kill or help?
Oh, I believe firmly it will help. And when you look at the models around the world where they've actually done that well and invested in setting up an entrepreneurial campus.
Yeah.
And the vision I have in my head is every student who goes to that university can graduate with a degree and a business if they want to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and again, look at the times that we're in right now with the tough economy.
This is the best time to found a business. I'm telling everyone.
What stronger value proposition, right?
And so I speak to a lot of Americans. I speak to a lot of American VCs. I speak to I was speaking to a PE firm the other day, and he was telling me, he said, we're strongly looking at New Zealand now because these are the markets and these are the times where you look at the markets like New Zealand where they have that ability to go out and get things done on a dime and grow revenue very quickly. And so I think any startup that's out there, any person that's out there thinking about, this is the wrong time to found a startup, this is the best time. If you look at all of our exits recently, like all the big multi-million-dollar exits, they all started around the GFC time.
Totally. And then we saw a whole new lot of companies spawn during COVID, right? So actually that's where Sharesies really popped up I mean, they started just before COVID hit, but in COVID they grew. FTN Motion, which is one of my favourite companies that have come through Creative HQ just because they make such a cool product. You know, they make the fully electric bikes, the street dogs, which are just...
I was trying to get him on the podcast today, actually. And
just
he's
so
moving
cool.
to Hamilton.
He is, but actually they're working out of our office at the moment for sort of their first 6 months of transition period.
Yeah.
And our 20th birthday party recently, we auctioned off an FTN motorbike. And they made these amazing little customized tags that said born at Creative HQ, which was really generous of them.
Cool.
But through that, actually, I got on one and test drove one, and it was just so cool.
Well, I haven't been on a bike since I got hit, and I've told the guys that that's going to be the first bike I get back on when we do the podcast. And so,
Nice.
I'm looking forward to it.
Amazing.
Hey, you just mentioned, I think I just cut you off. You're going to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I got diverted, but I was talking about FTN Motion and how they were one of the lockdown startups. So, you know, Luke and Kendall, two really cool guys in their garage tinkering around with a bike. I think they literally had a BMX bike from the tip or something that they attached a motor to and tried to work out how do we turn this into an electric motorcycle. So we've got the idea, we've got the engineering skills, we've got those technical skills. Now we don't know what to do with this to actually turn this into a business. A couple of years later, they're employing 22 people. They've got their first 100 bikes, built and delivered to customers. Now scaling into Australia.
A lot of people think about like startup incubators and like think tanks and creative HQ. Right? Let's look at Creative HQ as all right, I've got an idea. I go in there, and what do they do then to help me get that idea to germinate on that idea? So if let's for example say. Troy has a startup idea, which he often has 30, and he takes one of those ideas and says, all right, I'm going to get this out of my head, and then brings it to Creative HQ. What's the process? Let's go from like the ideation to then even coming to you. How does that start? Yeah,
awesome question. So what I'd recommend at the moment is you go onto Startup Aotearoa, which is a new website that we have built in partnership with our friends at Ministry of Awesome, because we're the two startup hubs in New Zealand really heavily focusing on those very early stage startups. We received funding from Callaghan Innovation to be able to do that. So if you log onto that website, the first thing you can do is book free startup sessions. So you can just log on and book a one-on-one session with one of the coaches. And there's some phenomenal coaches on there, you know, and they will talk to you about your idea and help you understand, help understand your why, because that's really important for a founder, that they're not doing this because they want to own a business, but they're doing that because they've got some sort of deeper purpose why. And then there's a series of up to 6 one-on-one coaching sessions that you can have to take your business forward.
And just on that, right? So a few times people have said to me, hey, like if I'm looking at Creative HQ, I usually hear it from an Auckland or an American point of view, and they'll go, oh, go onto the website, and then I look at these people and I don't know any of them, and so I don't trust any of them. And so I always say to them, well, a team of yes men is a redundant team, right? And so like if they were to give you the exact same advice that you've currently got in your head, what's the point of them giving that advice to you? And they go, oh yeah, actually, it's a good way of thinking about it. So these business like advisors, these coaches,
these are startup coaches, really experienced startup coaches
across a broad range of topics. And
one of the things we've done with Startup Aotearoa is tried to reduce fragmentation that exists in the New Zealand startup ecosystem, where you've got all these different players, and if you're starting, you've got one of your 30 ideas and you want to bring that in and you don't know where to go, actually Googling Creative HQ or Ministry of Awesome or Sprout or The Factory, you're going to go, actually, I don't know what the difference is between these people. I'm quite confused. Who's better? Which one am I going to go to? Actually, the idea of Startup Aotearoa is to bring some consistency and conformity to that, to simplify the process for founders. So actually you can just go to this one website, and actually you'll be directed to a coach in your local area. So we still want, we know that founders want to work with actually local coaches and be connected into their local ecosystem. But that the tools and resources that are going to be used to help you at that very early stage will be the same. And the quality of coaching that you're going to get, whichever part of the country you're in, is going to be the same. And it's the same high quality. So that's the first thing I do, is go to that website, and there's a whole ton of resources on there as well, everything from mental health and well-being to what are the different types of funding available, that you can start to read about. But actually a coach will take you through those things.
I know a lot of those coaches, and they're great, by the way.
Yeah. They really are. And then, and the people who have coached, you know, the Sharesies and Henrys through our, you know, from Creative HQ's point of view. And we have a no wrong door policy. So whether or not you think you've got a startup idea, whether or not you think your idea is good, you know, we're going to help channel you to a place of moving you forward, whatever happens in that first meeting. It might be that we see potential for a scalable and investable startup, so we might recommend that you go away and do some things, do some homework, come back to us for the second session. But either way,
what's the homework?
So the coaching sessions will be focused on things like we just talked about my why, but also viewing your business as a problem to be solved. So you go through a lot of analysis around, is this problem big enough? Is it urgent enough? You know, is it unsolved enough, you know, that I might have a business here, and teaching you how to do that. So know who your customer persona is, know how big your market size is, being able to define it as a narrow enough problem for you to go out and validate or not, whether you're solving the right problem or whether there's actually an adjacent problem that's right at the core of what you're trying to do. Once you've established your problem that you're solving, then we move you into ideation phase as to what are all the different ways that I could potentially solve that problem. And there's a whole lot of tools that we use around ideation as well. And then coming up with a solution. And once we get to the solution phase, it's having the founder narrow in on, okay, what is the one solution? Because there might be 50 solutions to this problem potentially, but what's the one solution that I think is probably the best fit for now, and I can go out and validate in a way really quickly and really cost efficiently, which is important because it breaks our heart when people walk through the door at solution phase. They haven't gone through why phase, they haven't gone through problem phase, they've just started at solution phase and say, I've spent $100,000 of my own money building this piece of tech. You know, for what? You know, so get them to validate their solution phase, their solution, and go through a build, measure, learn, you know, process, actually validating with customers. You know, one paying customer, of course, is better than 100 who say they might buy it if you build it. So keeping learning, adopting that curious mindset.
Is that the thing that most startup founders come to you with, like a fully fledged product in their mind that they have completely built in their head already? And
sometimes, I mean, I would say most often than not, when people make that first inquiry and say, I've got a business idea, but I don't know what to do with it, it's a solution.
You mentioned this in passing before, but I want to bring it up in a little bit more detail. 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Recently saw your report. 20 years of impact. And so I want to dig into that a little bit if I can. Like for someone that hasn't read the report, someone that hasn't looked through it, what do you think, what are the big key takeaways that you would want them to look at?
The 20-year impact report comes from, I think, a place of curiosity across our own organisation and asking questions, because we
Is
always...
that like ROI questions? Or?
Well, I think what we're very good at challenging ourselves and the narrative that we spin.
Yeah.
Because we want to be a very authentic organisation, and we want to be an organisation that genuinely adds value to founders' journeys. I mean, we realise how precious founders' journeys are.
Yeah.
And if we see ourselves as being entrusted with a small part of that journey at the beginning of the journey, and we take that really seriously. So we want to make sure that we're not paying lip service or we're not entertaining innovation theatre ourselves, that we're actually providing services that add value. And along the way, as we've delivered our services over the last 20 years, we capture the impact that we create in different ways. After each program that we run, we write a program report for our stakeholders and funders, and it has the stories of each founder in there and where they started the program and what level of investment they raised at the end. We do annual surveys that says, these are the companies that are still in business, this is how much capital they've raised, this is how many jobs they've created. Those things are easier to capture immediately upon them leaving the programs. The further away they are from leaving our programs, the harder it is, obviously, to get that information. But along the way, the consistent thing across all of that is we say we're here to provide impact, which is true. But actually we said, okay, across 20 years, what is the total impact that we have actually created? And how do we tell that story? Because we've always been a pretty humble organisation. It's always about, we're here to serve founders, and how do we promote our founders and how do we push their stories out? But it felt like a good time to reflect on actually what's our story, and what is the true impact that we create.
Well, your story also gives confidence to the next round of 20 years of founders, right?
Absolutely. And also I think to government, from a funding perspective, from a supporting startups as a sector perspective, and understanding the value they can create to the New Zealand economy as a whole, telling that story to them.
Yeah. Do you think, sorry to cut you off there, but Judith Collins is really like gung-ho on investing in the startup sector, which I think is great. Do you think that that's going to mean further investment, or is it going to be like plateaued, or like a tricky question? I don't know, but
yeah, look at it as a tricky question, and we are obviously pretty politically neutral as an organisation. We need to be. I think what we've had Judith Collins along for a few things recently. She came to our pre-election innovation debate that we ran. She came to our 20th birthday party and spoke there. And I think, there's a consistent message that we're sort of giving her, which is that New Zealand is underinvested at the moment in the startup economy. I think we put 1.4% of our, GDP measured by R&D spend into startups or the technology sector as a whole. If you compare that to countries like Finland, which put in 3%, they have not just a much better financial return, economic return from that sector in terms of contribution to their GDP, but they have social outcomes as well. So things like they have a higher score on the Human Development Index, I think it is. They have a higher GDP per capita. They have less income inequality. Now, if we spent 3%, if we just increased that 1.4% we spend to 3%, that would be, I think, a $59 billion additional contribution to GDP each year, but also actually creating those social, economic, environmental outcomes as well for New Zealanders.
Yeah.
And a great example of that, for example, is Dylan Nightingale, who's one of the founders who came through fairly recently through what we call our GovTech Accelerator program. Now, Dylan is a really experienced lawyer, barrister who works in Wellington. That's her day job. Volunteered at the Community Law Centre, and as part of that volunteering role, she discovered that there was a lot of immigrant exploitation taking place right here in Wellington. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but they're pretty shocking. I mean, I'm a born and bred Wellingtonian, and I was horrified to hear.
I read an article on it, yeah.
Yeah, the level of exploitation that was taking place. And I think MB had a team that were working on it, but she said, I can actually create a more meaningful outcome for this. I feel pretty passionate about this problem that needs solving, and I think I can do a good job of solving this, and I want to have a crack at it. And so came through our program and has actually ended up building an app. And in saying she's built an app, it doesn't do it justice, actually. It's... Yeah. Again, designed to solve the problem. She's quantified the problem, and she's got some early investment in that. That's not about creating wealth for Dylan. That's about truly solving this problem of immigrant exploitation that's taking place on our doorsteps.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of that social impact entrepreneurship too that we can be fostering.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at any country around the world, they are growing the amount of investment that they're putting into the startup ecosystem, and you can only look at what's happened in Australia over the last 10 years and say there has been so many government-led startup initiatives that have spun out so many great opportunities. And I can count some of the startups on on my hand here now that I've seen go through these places and had we're looking at billionaires, we're looking at these unicorns now popping out of Australia that have come through these initiatives. And so I'm personally really passionate about it. And I've had a few chats with Judith over the years, about how, and I know she's passionate about it. So I'm keen to see this increase. Oh,
look, I totally believe she is. She's certainly, from my point of view, engaging well with the sector. The Upstart Nation report that was released last year by the New Zealand Innovation Council had some great recommendations in there. So it will be interesting to see how many of those are taken up by the government and supported. Early days, but yeah. We've got, I think it's great that we've got a very experienced minister in there. Yeah,
excellent. Well, I sent us down a bit of a tangent there, sorry, as you were going over some of the things that, looking at 20 years of impact. What's something that you're probably most proud of from your time?
Oh, there's so much to be proud of. And I think to take us off down another tangent, I'm not someone who has a startup background. I came through a very traditional I was a lawyer for many years, went to London on my OE for 2 years, stayed for 15 years, worked on trading floors for a large portion of that time for large investment banks. Had most of my children, it makes it sound like I've got 8 children, actually I've got 3, but had 2 of them in London. And when I was 7 months pregnant with our 3rd child, we moved home to New Zealand, and I took 5 years out from my career, 3 children under 5, to get all my babies into school.
Yeah.
And during that time really reflected on what is it that I want to do, because I'm a big believer that you live your life in chapters and stages.
100% agree with you.
And I just want to make every single one of those count. I've just got such a zest for life. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I knew that I wanted to do something that when I went to bed on a Sunday night, I woke up the next day and was excited by what the week had ahead of me. And sort of stumbled across Creative HQ because I was investing in one of their startups, personally, and sort of got to know them, went through their doors, started chatting to a couple of people, and pretty quickly thought, wow, what an amazing environment to be in. There's so many smart, sharp people here, really experienced entrepreneurs. I don't actually know a lot about this world, but I want to know more. It's the inspiration element I was talking before, but it's also there's a whole lot of technical knowledge here. And then when you start to learn so much about it, you realize that actually this is local economies. These are people who are building companies that create jobs for people that are, we say we do cool shit with cool people.
Yeah.
And basically,
I like that.
Basically that's it. So I came through the doors of Creative HQ and said, actually, look, I'm the person off the street who's just getting to know this industry. And there's so many founders doing so many cool things here. Why does your average Wellingtonian not know about them? And so I think, what I'm proud of is every single one of those founders who has come through the doors and had the courage to have a go. And we've had about 1,000 founders through our doors, I think 400 and odd companies growing, by the program. Startups have been created. I think 60% of those are still active today.
That's a phenomenal number.
It's a phenomenal number. Yeah.
Because 1 in 4 small businesses fail, right? So 25% is the average of businesses that stay.
Yeah.
And so 60% still in business is a phenomenal number.
Yeah. And actually, I should correct that. So 60% still in business after 5 years, which is kind of, the period where businesses die, right? Yeah. If you can survive those first 5 years. And I think, well, yeah. And what is it about that? What's unique about the startup founders? I mean, there's a lot of things. I think there's a particular personality that goes into being a startup founder where you build resilience and grit. And if at first the idea doesn't, succeed, you learn, you pivot, you try again. But also we like to think that at that very early stage, the programming that we provide, and studies show that programming that you provide, connecting people to the expertise that they need at the right time for them, significantly helps with their ongoing success.
So there's probably 2 camps of people that listen to this and go, one camp says you're accelerating, the other say you're de-accelerating, you're putting the brakes on because you're thinking about risk and governance and you're thinking about process and, we just want to get shit done, right? So I have my view on it as well, which I think that the more you think about that stuff at the start, the faster you can go, personally. But I think you definitely need to think about growing a business from day one, not just having a product.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to those people though?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, what we have learnt is that you need to build a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that will feed, like comes to like, right? So if you're building an ecosystem that is nurturing this type of activity, this type of creativity, this type of experimentation amongst founders and potential founders, then you're more likely to be able to get success stories coming out of it, because there's a home, there's a place, there's, where people can come, whether it's a lunch and learn or a meetup session with 20 people, or whether it's coming to a plenary session with, the chief growth officer from Canvas come over to speak to 200 people. There's lots of learning and lots of conversations to be had with like-minded people. So creating that community, we think, is one of the areas that you need for success. And then having the programming in place that connects people to the right help at the right time, whether that's help with funding, whether it's help with mentorship or coaching, building capability, using the tools at that very early stage, because as you say, it's not just about finding that product market fit, but thinking about, helping founders think about becoming CEOs and leaders and building teams around them, strong teams around them. So all of that sort of leadership coaching. Connecting to funding is obviously critical, again, at the right time, and helping founders do that safely.
Yeah.
So what is the right funding? What is the right investor for you?
What do you mean by safely?
At what time? A lot of founders come in and don't know a lot about how to capital raise or the types of funding that's available to them.
Yeah.
And so they find themselves, if they've got an idea that's scaling quite quickly and they've found that product market fit and they've built a team and they're getting that early success, what is the right time to take that capital funding and from who? What is going to be a good investor fit for them?
I see too on the startup A2RL program that you've got investors now in that too. Like you've got people willing to pop in money, from these from not just internally.
Yeah, we've got the Marlborough Angels who have come on board there, and hopefully we'll get more investors on board as well.
Yeah.
But I think too, through coming through Startup Aotearoa and having your coaching sessions, the idea is that will lead to a structured program like an accelerator program, for example. And once you're in an accelerator program, we make sure that investors are getting in front of these founders pretty early, whether or not they're ready to raise investment. We want founders to be talking to them really early on so they can learn. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just about choosing or being ready, but they can learn what it is that investors need.
The vocabulary.
To invest, the vocabulary, the different types of investors out there, what type of investment is best for what stage of your journey and your growth, thinking about, your vision for your company, how long should you bootstrap for before you take investment, and it's going to be different for different companies, right? So there isn't a one-size-fits-all model.
Excellent. What do you think is this like the secret to like success in startups? Like what's the one thing that you've seen in founders? Like you touched on this before, like that grit and determination. But as you see them all get together, as you see it creating, what are the things that you notice?
So it does start with a great founder. And I know when we're choosing teams for our accelerator programs, which are always heavily oversubscribed, certainly the founder is a key element that we're looking for. We want coachability in founders, people who are actually willing to adopt that open mindset and be prepared to pivot or be prepared to accept that things might be going wrong and actually they need to go back and do some validation or some learning on things.
What percentage do you think come through the accelerator and pivot a little bit?
I don't know the percentage on that. It's because it can be quite organic, as you're going about your weekly coaching sessions.
Yeah.
When is the right time to pivot, and you can have soft pivots and hard pivots. I mean, I don't know the percentage, but it's pretty high, I think, to be doing some sort of pivoting.
Even if it's a validation pivot, right?
Yeah, even just as you build, measure, learn, how many times do you need to go through that build, measure, learn cycle before you find that product market fit, or you've worked out what sector or what vertical I'm going to apply my technology to, or I mean, there's lots of different variations there and permutations.
Yeah.
So a great founder who is coachable. The why, I think, is really important. Again, we've had founders come through. There's some stories in our 20-year impact report. I think Mike Lovegrove from Journey has a great story in there.
I love Mike.
Yeah. Everybody loves Mike, right? And I think one of the reasons we love Mike is because he's willing to talk about the failures as well as the successes. And he's had enormous success in his time, but certainly the company he came through Creative HQ with, Journey, ultimately failed. And he's been very open about that and very open about the impact that had on him. But then what that led to, again, we talk about life in chapters. And so, what knowledge he built up during that to be able to go on and then be successful.
Yeah.
In future ventures.
And he didn't he took that knowledge and was really vulnerable and open about it. And he ran nights in London and New Zealand, in helping to teach people, learn from his mistakes.
Yep.
I think that's so important.
And he's so keen to tell that story and to share that story because, again, we can't just share the successes. We have to talk about what can go wrong as well. And there's no such thing as an overnight success in startup world. It's a 7-year success for most of those stories. And every single one of those years is grit and determination and resilience and falling over and being able to pick yourself up again. There's huge triumphs along the way and things to celebrate. And it's important that you do celebrate them as you succeed. But there's a lot of obstacles along the way.
So talk me through the accelerator programs. what are people? So number one, people. I'm going to ask you questions that some people who have never been and never heard about it before. Does it cost me money? Do I get paid? Like what's the like the financial thing there? Because do I have to take time out of my job? Do I have to quit? Can I do it part time?
So the Creative HQ Accelerator model has evolved over time, and where we're at today in a post-COVID world is that we run a hybrid program. So you apply to be on the accelerator program. We officially launch the program and then open applications, and there's a web form that you fill out to apply. We have interview days, much like you're going for a job interview, but you're going for an interview to be in the program. And then if you're accepted into the program, you actually sign a contract which talks about, code of conduct and the things that you will do and the things we will do. It's a pretty simple contract. And then it's a 12-week program is the way we run them at the moment, hybrid. So you don't have to commit to it full time, but we do want a significant amount of your time committed to it.
Yeah.
There are moments within the program, for example, boot camp at the start of it, where we ask all founders to come to Wellington for the week and to do that kickoff activity, get familiar with the program, set themselves up for success in the program. And then there are periods throughout the program where we get people back together. It's free to enter the program. Our programs are funded for by Callaghan Innovation, our shareholder, Wellington NZ, and then a lot of corporate or private sponsors who come in. And it's very intense. So it will take over your life for 12 weeks. So we accept that sometimes people still have a part of a day job to do, right? But exactly.
As it should. Like if I'm going to invest in your startup, right, I want to see that you're committed to it.
Totally. And what we're aiming for ultimately in those programs is to get people to their point of first investment. And one of the many things I'm proud of at Creative HQ is the fact that our average size first investment following an accelerator program is around $670,000, which is pretty good going. And again, that's above the global average for first investment in accelerators. So as you say, as it should be, this is serious business.
Yeah. I get a lot of people, like, because I'm the startup recruitment guy, right? And so I get a lot of people, hey, Troy, I've got this idea, and I want to hire these people. And I'm like, cool, and talk me through it. Oh, no, I haven't built it yet. I'm still working full time. And I'm like, man, come and see me when you're like in it, right? Like I'm not taking your money, nor I'm going to back you to until you've thrown yourself into it. Yeah. And that's hard, right? Like you've got to, and I think that's why when you talk about the personality traits and the grit and the tenacity of a founder is that they've, she or he have said, I'm going to go after this.
Yeah. Totally. And so we've just kicked off our third climate response accelerator. So we've got 9 teams going through that who are all, working on businesses related to the impact of climate.
How do you like this? This is harder at climate and like climate tech, right? In a bear market, it's definitely a lot more challenging, right? I mean, I'm a massive climate enthusiast. I think that we should be definitely doing stuff that gives this earth to our children's children for longer. But how do you then take the market conditions into that now? Like, is that something that they're all thinking about, what they can do, how they can create, how they can be better, how they can get revenue like started now? Is that something that you've had to pivot with as the market conditions change?
Yeah, I think the topic of climate is a really interesting one, and one that New Zealand can lead the world on. We were talking before about...
We have led the world before.
And we can continue to do so. And I think, I like to think of New Zealand as a perfect petri dish to validate, businesses on. And I think it's one of the reasons we are so successful with startup companies, and we can be even more successful. When you're an entrepreneur with these climate-related business ideas, you can actually form the business, validate it, roll it out in New Zealand as your test market, and then you can quickly scale to the world if you've got the right idea. And we've got a business coming in. I'm just getting to learn the businesses that have come into this accelerator, because I'm not running it, I'm not coaching in it. But, we've got Refib, for example.
Who was it, sorry? Refib.
Yeah, watch the space. And again, we give the names before the world hears about them, right? Because we take them at a very early age. But they're basically, revolutionising construction, I think, through building sustainable business products out of waste that you can't otherwise recycle. So we're talking about used paper towels and things, to come up with sustainable building materials out of... tremendous technology going into this, science, some great founders there. But then, test that in New Zealand, get your product going, get your market going, and then scale it to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is looking at New Zealand for this. You know, we're known for being that clean, green company, and we're seeing a lot of interest from US investors at the moment who are saying we want to invest in clean tech.
Yeah.
You know, we want to invest in these climate response companies. What have you got?
Yeah. And I think we have the DNA right here in New Zealand. It's part of our genetic makeup almost that we want to do something good for the environment here.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting now, like that I see a lot of people who come to me in recruitment and say, hey, I want to get into green tech. But then the challenge with green tech is they also want to be paid through the roof, right? And so I'm like, well, you don't work in a startup to get rich, you know, from day one, and you don't go into something like climate tech, you know, to get rich. And so that's the balance of like trying to find revenue ideas, like revenue opportunities to then create staff opportunities because of it.
Yeah, look, sustainability I think is just something that's accepted to be within every new company that grows anyway. It's, you know, I don't think you can have a viable new business going forward that doesn't have some element of sustainability to it, whether it's your product or service or whether it's just the practice of your business or how you run your business. And we have some amazing role models in New Zealand, you know, Brian West from Atik, who showed us that actually you can marry sustainability with high returns for your investors. I mean,
I love her.
What was it? Oh, everybody loves her. And I mean, what was the return on her investment for her first investors? I don't know, 2,800% or something, you know, something enormous like that. But, you know, the companies coming through the Climate Response Accelerator are companies that have products and services specifically designed around the climate, you know, impact mitigation.
Awesome. And so now we're thinking like the last 20 years, you know, has been quite impactful. Like, this season, I'm not sure if you've seen the podcast this season or not, but we are asking the previous guests to give you a question that you can answer. And I think if I'm thinking about the last 20 years, this question actually goes really well. And the question is, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? And what are you doing about it today? And so maybe I'll ask the question, like, what does the next 20 years look like for Creative HQ and what are you doing about it today?
Yeah, well, certainly the next 5 years, so between now and 2030, we've set ourselves a goal of having 400 active startups that we've put our thumbprint on contributing to the New Zealand economy.
New startups or existing and new?
Well, we're starting from a base of 191, I think, as at today. But of course, some of those will exit or close or whatever, and new ones will sprout up. Now, I don't know whether you're sitting there thinking 400 is a big number or a small number, but what we know is that we need to, as an organisation, put a thumbprint on 1,200 founders per year to be able to have 400 thriving, scalable, you know, investable startups who can serve on a world stage by 2030. And we know that the New Zealand economy needs 5,000 of these, you know, startups thriving by 2030. So that's the national goal in New Zealand, and Creative HQ is very happy and very willing to play our part. So for us, that involves 4xing our startup services between now and 2030. So we're just preparing. We've just put a new strategy in place to support that. We're just preparing to do that with our next financial year, which starts on 1 July. We won't get to 4x straight away because we need funding to be able to do that. And if you're someone listening to this podcast and you have money to support the programming of these very early stage startups, then we'd love to hear from you because, you know, in a tight economy, again, everybody wants us to do the job we're doing, and everybody knows that the big companies that are very safe to invest in start as little companies. Actually, we need people to support the startup.
So who are
programming,
who are they though?
Now.
It's not just government, right? It's not just Callaghan. It's like corporate sector as well.
Corporate sector, philanthropists, high net worth individuals. It's a real combination.
Where is your funding come from? Like, what percentage has been like public sector funding?
So our accounts are public each year. You can go online and look at them. So Callaghan funding gives us, you know, the cornerstone of our startup programming funding every year. And we need to 2-to-1 match fund that. So our shareholder, Wellington NZ, gives us some of that money, and the rest we have to go out and source. And it comes from different players, depending on the program, depending on the year. But we've had a mix of corporate private philanthropy. So, for example, our Climate Response Accelerator that we're running now, we've got money from Callaghan Innovation, from Wellington NZ, our shareholder, but also from Balance Agri-Nutrients. Motion Capital have put up $100,000 of guaranteed equity in one of the companies coming through.
That's awesome.
And that's really enabled us to attract some really great quality teams to the program. And then Whakatupu have put up another 100,000 that founders can take as a safe note. They can elect to take that as a safe note coming into the program as well. So those are our founders for this particular program.
Do you think that's a way that you can get money in easier, like this type of investment, this like a blended investment model?
Yeah, I mean, look, the ultimate for me would be, we can set up a fund specifically to support these early stage startups, and that a portion of the fund can be carved off, whether that's 10%, 20%, to run the programs, with a real clear acknowledgement that actually running the program does increase the chances significantly of success of these companies. And that we're growing companies within the startups that are investable from the start.
Because it feels that's tangible to me, right? Like that's definitively, you're helping to run these like startups. You're helping them breathe them life.
Yep.
And then you've got to the point where they've got life. They've figured out who they are, and then they're now investable. And to be able to then invest or have a fund as well, which can be, if we're looking 20 years from now, return on investment, is fantastic.
Totally. And if you're a funder, then actually at some point between now and that 20-year period, your investment becomes sustainable, right? You can actually contribute to our programming without needing to put any more money in.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the topics that's on my agenda at the moment. Is one of the initiatives I'm trying to drive forward is setting up exactly that type of fund.
Yeah. I'm very scared, the right word or not. I'm in a moment in time right now where I'm thinking about the future of New Zealand's startup ecosystem, and I'm looking at the opportunity that we have right now. And I've said this many times, and the corporate world says, don't waste a recession. Don't waste a recession. What they mean by that is this is the time to invest is right now. When everything's going down and everything's scary, this is where the rich get richer, right? Is they'll invest and then their investments rise. We only got to look at the stock market or Bitcoin at the moment. So this, for me, with the public sector and the government and anyone looking at things like this is where we double down now and we create the next 20 years of success. And this is where every country around the world right now is doing this or has done this. And this is a moment in time that I'm thinking, is this lip service from the government, for our ecosystem, or is this an opportunity for everyone to really double down and invest?
Oh, look, amen to that. And I think if you look at the Irish government, they're sitting on something like a $16 billion surplus because they invested in a startup portfolio, however many years ago.
Tech is oil, right? And look at the United Arab Emirates, right? The tech is oil, and I think the investment that we can get back on it, the return we can get back on investment is huge.
Look, it's our second biggest export sector at the moment. It's fast growing, can become our biggest sector. And the more people we have internally, government does need to get on board with that. Government are on board with that to a degree. We want more, but actually let's not wait for government to do that for us. Again, there's a lot of people with the means in New Zealand who can help us do that.
Yeah, agreed.
So, we want to get them. We want a coalition of the willing to come along and just help us take advantage of this opportunity.
Awesome. Catherine, I think one thing that's been evident to chatting you today is you are amplifying other people's opportunities and stories. Even just hearing you talk about this company and this person and this founder, and I love that. And I love what Creative HQs are doing. We're going to finish this episode right now with your question. What would you ask the next guest that you have no idea who's coming on and what the context is, but what would be the question that you'd want to ask them?
So much of the success of our founders is through people giving back. And so I'd like to ask, I don't know who your next guest is, but I'd love for you to ask them how they can best give back and what are they going to do about it today to start that.
Excellent. Mahesh will enjoy that question, if you know Mahesh. That'll be a great question. I'm sure he can talk until the cows come home on that.
Nice.
How would you answer that question yourself?
I think by bringing together, uncovering all of the great people and creating a community that they can be a part of and give back to now.
Yeah, excellent.
We keep the community together.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope there's lots of people out there writing checks at the moment and thinking about what they can do to support and help New Zealand's startup ecosystem, whether it be, via Creative HQ, hopefully, or via do something to support it, because I think the industry is at the precipice now of massive opportunity. massive opportunity. Like I can literally, I'm an Australian, so I can go back and draw a line in the sand exactly when I saw the, Australian government and the Australian private sector say there's something in this startup malarkey here, and start investing in it and start creating incubators, start now opportunities like the early Blackbird team and what they've done with the incubators. And we look at it now, we fast forward now, and this is the reason why we have so many of these unicorns popping out of Australia now. And so I think this is really exciting, this to be the time now that New Zealand really gets behind this.
Agreed.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing space, Catherine. I really enjoyed that conversation. I love chatting to Wellington people as a Wellingtonian who are really passionate about doing things in Wellington and for New Zealand, but a little bit secretly for Wellington. And so thank you for everyone that's been watching. Please like and subscribe. Share this podcast around. Help us build the audience. We've been pushing really hard to give you the best podcast experience that we can give you. And so thanks for watching. I'm Troy Hammond. See you next time.
This podcast is produced by John O'Tucker from Empire Films.